Grief and clutter are deeply connected, but one of the most overlooked types of clutter is end-of-life paperwork. In today's episode, we are joined by the lovely Emma Gray. Emma is a qualified therapeutic counselor, wills and probate solicitor, and founder of Rainbow Hunting. After being widowed at just 39, Emma has dedicated her work to helping people move through the emotional barriers around end-of-life admin. Just a warning that in this podcast, we are talking about grief and the loss of a loved one.
You're listening to the Declutter Hub podcast, bringing you tried and tested, no-nonsense tips and advice from the leading experts in decluttering and organising your home. Now here are your hosts, Ingrid Jansen and Leslie Spellman.
Hello and welcome, listeners. I'm Ingrid.
And I'm Leslie. Now, if you're here for the very first time today, or you've been listening in for ages, we want to say a huge thank you. And we have a little favour to ask.
If you like what you hear, be sure to hit that follow or subscribe button, share us with your friends, or leave us a review. It makes a huge difference to us. Hello and welcome, Emma. Thank you for being here. It's so nice to have you on the show finally.
I know, I'm very excited. And I will say it a million times, but I still am I feel very honoured that you two lovely ladies came and found me at the Clean and Tidy show, because I genuinely felt like I had celebs come and visit me. I was like, oh, this is so exciting.
Well, you've been on our radar for a while because of what the topic that you have, and we kind of see you on Instagram, and we know you from now also the Association of Professional Declutterers and Organisers. But indeed, the last year at the Clean and Tidy Home Show was like the perfect opportunity to really kind of meet up and go, let's come on the show. And through loads of different circumstances, we haven't made it until now, but I'm delighted you're here because I think your message and what you want to have to share is so important for people to hear, because especially wills and end-of-life paperwork is not kind of a topic that people talk about on a coffee, on a coffee morning. You have to kind of dive into it and understand the story. So can you share with us your story? How did you end up doing what you're doing now with Rainbow Hunting?
Oh, bless you. Yes, it's a bit of an about turn, but in a funny kind of way, it feels like my soul's purpose. So when we had a healthy family and my lovely late husband was in the Royal Marines and I was effectively solo parenting, I was a wills and probate lawyer. And that meant I help people draft wills and administer estates, so deal with all the paperwork after people died. And I'd done it for many, many, many years. And then sadly, Simon got poorly, and he got diagnosed in 2013 when the kids were just 3 and 5 years old. We knew from day one that it was terminal, but he didn't want other people to know. He was a very proud and quite a private person. I think he'd be horrified with how much of my life I share on social media now, but there we go. So I managed to keep my job going through 6 houses in 6 years, through his illness, and I had quite a big amount of compassionate leave after he died. But then I went back to the old world and I realised that the old world without him in it didn't really work. But also I was getting quite burnt out. So I felt like solo parenting when he was at the end of the phone was very, very, very different to solo parenting entirely on my own. We have a really neurodivergent family as well. So when you've got kids, that adds its own challenges. And work, I was working part-time, but still expected to bill pro rata, so the pressure was on, and they like to roll me out to do marketing events and things like that. So long story short, I suddenly decided that one of the things that we had done, whether it be my job, whether it be his job, whether it be the fact that we just were a little bit more organised than many people in their 30s, but we had put quite a lot in place. So when he died, I had the financial freedom to take a break and a career break. And so I went into work and said, I need to sort out my house, because we'd moved house to be close to school, and I had put everything I didn't want to live with in the garage. And I'd done that absolute typical declutter nightmare of wake up and realize I had a double garage full of stuff. Um, and and also I wanted to be a better mummy. And so I worked all my files down. Work were amazing. They let me go on sabbatical, but I handed over with a gut feel that I would never go back. And 2 weeks after walking out the door, lo and behold, we went into lockdown. And I was like, oh boy, like I love my kids to pieces. But all of a sudden I had a bit of a crisis. I didn't like the label of widow. I wasn't a wife. I was no longer a lawyer. Ironically, the moment I stopped being a lawyer, I was really proud of it. Whereas I used to say it like an excuse, like I'm a solicitor, sorry. And I was just like, I've no idea what I want to do with my world. I don't know what I want to do with my life. So that's when I started to share my story. And I initially decided I'd be a counsellor. And then I decided actually holding people's stuff was a lot. So in fact, actually, maybe I'd be a coach and help with paperwork side and the grief. But my heart has always been in the mental health, mental wellness, the psychology. So I finally this year finished my counselling qualification. So I am in fact a qualified counsellor as well as a grief and life coach, which is amazing because I think it adds depth and breadth. I can look forwards. I think a lot of people are more ready to come to a coach than they are necessarily to come to a counsellor. But I work quite therapeutically, so I can do all that looking backwards stuff as well. So I think that roughly gets me from A to B, but it feels like my soul's purpose.
Yeah, yeah. So were you guys, so you kind of mentioned in between that you guys were quite organized, because end of life paperwork is a lot more than just a will, right?
Yeah. So I always say, if you don't know where to start with the will, because the will is the only legal document in the UK, but I think it's probably pretty worldwide. But obviously, I work in the UK. But your will is the only document saying who gets what when you die. But there is so much more around it. I often say that that's the backbone, and there's so much more that makes up the full picture. So yes, we were organised. We partly because of my job, I think, but we were more organised than most people in their 30s, but we still didn't get super organised until his diagnosis. It was his diagnosis that kicked me into action. But one of the things I'm passionate about is none of us know when we're going to die. So actually, we should all have this in place now, because we don't want wills to be a crisis purchase. What we want at crisis is to be able to emotionally be with someone, to be able to support them, to think about their pain relief, to think about memories and telling stories and the emotional side of processing it. We don't want to be rushing around finding a lawyer, worrying about capacity and undue influence and all these other things. We really want the paperwork to already be in place. So yeah, I've also seen how it's gone wrong, both in my old world as a lawyer, where I totally know how expensive it is when it goes wrong, and it is frighteningly it was really fascinating. One of the jobs I had in Exeter, we shared a floor with the family team, the contentious probate team, and us as wills and probate. And in the time I was there, the contentious probate team in only a couple of years tripled in size, which is crazy. And it just shows how, if you don't get it right, if you haven't done it at all, if you do it but you don't get the right advice, pay now for the advice and it's easier the other side. Don't do it, and the cost and the complication and the stress the other side is just massive.
Yeah. So just of course, a reminder to the listeners, Emma is here in the UK. All the terminology that she uses is of course UK terminology. So if you're listening to this elsewhere around the world, make sure that you know what it's called in your country. But here you've got your will, you've got your power of attorney, you've got your letter of wishes. What else do we need to think about in kind of the end of life paperwork?
Oh,
list.
I love that. And I think, I often rewind people and I actually say, if you're doing a massive review of your end of life paperwork, you're adding into, we all have already very busy, very full lives. So actually I rewind people and start off with, are you sleeping okay? Have you got the space in your life? How can you create the space in your life to do this without burning you out? Then I take them into the legals because I think that they are, like I said, the will is the only legal document saying who gets what when you die. So that's the first thing. And as you'll know with decluttering, taking it step by step, breaking it down into small steps is literally the best way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And getting some support so that you've got people who are around you who can help you. And then the powers of attorney. So the difference, the will is the who gets what when you die. In the UK, the document is the lasting power of attorney. There's two types, one for finances, one for welfare. And they say who can help you to who can make decisions for you if you're unable to do so, either because of physical or mental disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of more in your lifetime. Then there is a legal health document in the UK called an advance decision. You can't say what treatment you want, but you can say what treatment you want to refuse. So for example, my husband refused to be resuscitated because he had a patch of cancer by his heart. So if his heart had faltered, it would probably have been linked to the cancer, and who he would have been post CPR would have been very different to who he was the other side. So that's the next kind of important thing. So do the legals, then I take people on to practical stuff, and this is more about kind of the utilities, the bank accounts, the insurances, the pensions. Not just have you got them in place, but do people know where to find them? Do they know how to discover them without having to break into a phone or what have you? And then I take people through the digital stuff. And again, I think so much of our lives is online these days. So having an inventory, my kids know how to get into my mobile phone. I think that is the access to my world. Yes, it means that, they can see whatever they want in my phone, but you've got to have a trust thing there, don't you? And actually, as teenagers, I feel incredibly privileged, but they've done the same to me. And I've got the passcode for their phones so that, God forbid if something happens, we can access each other's photos. It's stuff like that that people just don't think about. And social media, there's so much to the digital. It's not just your bank account. It's our lives are so much online now. And then, as with all declutterers, I leave the emotional stuff to the end because I think that's where people go down memory lane. So that's more when we start to think about your funeral, letters of wishes. So letters of wishes sometimes relate to the will, sometimes they relate to children, to pets, but they're an explanation as to why you've done what you've done, but they also are to help people understand how to better do their job. You're asking someone to be, if they're meant to administer your estate, they're your executor. If you've left a trust, they're your trustee. If you've got children, it's your guardian. But they're massive jobs. And if you just say, hey, do this for me, but with no rule book, that's a massive ask you're asking them. And sometimes it's too emotional to have the conversation. So write it down, tell people where it is, and then they can discover it when they need it.
Yeah. And did you have all of this sorted like way at the beginning, like when the children were born, or is this been kind of something that over time developed but kind of got into more of a kind of fast forwarded because of course your late husband became ill? Were you the super organized person with a will at 30, or is it something that kind of grew over time?
So the perfect answer is about the will, because yes, I've always had a will. I think my dad encouraged me to have a will in my late teens, early 20s, which is very young. But as soon as you're 18, you own assets. So in the UK, if you have no will, then there is something called the laws of intestacy that governs who gets what, and it may not be what you want. So I had a will from a very young age, but I redid it. So I redid it when we got married. I redid it when we had kids. I've redone it since my husband's died. I've redone it since I've had my own business. You know, I've kept on top of that. But I'm not Instagram perfect. So no, I often live in paperwork hell. And one of the reasons I'm so passionate about what I do is I have a quirky, neurodivergent ADHD brain, and I know how difficult all of this is.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think people love me, because I'm actually honest about how hard it all is.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I don't have everything. And so our catalyst was his illness, and it really, it panicked me that we didn't have stuff organized, and that was our impetus to get stuff sorted.
Yeah. Because what I see a lot with clients who come to us, whether it's in my one-to-one business or within the Declutter Hub, it's not the paperwork alone. It's normally lots of other things that are cluttered and there's too much. And it's in my opinion, it's very important to first start clearing the clutter in the kitchen and the bathroom and the clothes in the bedroom, and because you have to work your way up towards being able to tackle paperwork clutter. Because whether it's 5 years of paper clutter or 25 years of paper clutter, you need space to be able to spread it all out and make different piles and put it in date order. Because it's I think really important to have all of that basic paperwork sorted and to get that clarity in your head as well, to then be able to move into digital and move into end of life paperwork like wills and things like that. Because often you can't start at the end, you have to start at the beginning. But sometimes, of course, when somebody, especially when they suddenly pass away, you have to start at the end and work your way back. And that is super hard, isn't it? Because you're trying to unravel something. So that's why I'm always so grateful when people come into our world and go, right, okay, I've realized that I need to, have less, own less, have more space, have more clarity, because I know that I am getting older and my physical health is gonna, slowly but surely go down. And I'm not even talking about, suddenly somebody passing away, but just the reality of life. And I want to kind of sort my house out. And then once that happens, there's more space, mental space to go, right, actually, now I need to think about digital, and now I need to think about a will. But a will is just not something that people want to talk about, right?
And that's why I do my challenge, because I try to kind of almost gamify the concept of doing a will, because I think so often, yes, I think death is the only thing that we're going to 100% succeed in, all of us at some point, someday. But especially here in Britain, we often don't talk about it. And I think it's totally understand why we don't talk about it, because it's bound up with so much emotion. And I think sometimes our nervous system, we either go into fight or flight. So someone mentions a will and we get grumpy and we get anxious and we get worried, or we go into like dorsal, like I call it, like a dormouse, and we just shut down and we just bury our heads in the sand and we don't want to do it. But even just that, even just understanding what we're doing and why we're doing it, you can start to understand, okay, so a bit more compassion. This is really big. This is really scary. And often there is a reason why it's really painful for people. So either they've had a bereavement, they don't like thinking about their own death. I think there's a lot of anticipatory grief bound up in it all. So I think that people worry about their own death and what will happen. And especially I find a lot of people come to me who've got children with additional needs. And so the concept of actually the adult going before the child is quite scary as to then what happens to that child, which is a really big one as well.
Yeah.
And often I find it's the people who don't do the wills are the people who need the wills, which is fascinating.
Yeah. It was interesting. And I think I've mentioned it on another podcast before, but at some point my father was very poorly and my mother was very poorly as well. So she actually, my father's passed away now, but my mother is still alive, and she wanted to sort her will. So she contacted like a will company in the Netherlands. And the lady was like on the phone, okay, and is it like an urgent appointment? And my mom said, well, I wasn't planning on dying anytime soon, but I think I want to get this organized. And the lady came to my mom's house, and my mom is like, well, she is one of the most organized people I know. I don't have it from, it's run through the family. But she had like her lever arch file ready with all of her things and her policies. And the lady was like blown away going, wow, you are. And my mother was like, yeah, because I want to get this sorted. So I grew up in a world where we would talk about that. And I mean, I didn't have a will when I was 20. I have a will now, but it was not something that was never talked about or discussed. And I think it's also very culturally different how people talk about, dying and death and wills and things like that. But it's inevitable. And I don't think lots of people realize how many things you need to know right when somebody passes away, and how many decisions. And like my dad passed away a couple of years ago, and although we had lots of stuff in place, there were still things that we didn't know, and kind of the
Yeah.
best
And I thought my husband and I had done that. I thought we'd like organized so much and all the rest of it. And he had not given me one hymn or one reading or prayer. And I was like, oh my good grief, he could have at least told me what the Royal Marine hymn was. Like, like, come on.
yeah
And I know it sounds really strange, but actually that really, really surprised me that you can't do it all, you can't, perfect doesn't exist, does it? But doing as much as you can makes a massive, massive difference. And also leaning on people who know. So leaning on people who've been through it. You've been through it with your dad, and I've been through it with my husband. And it's amazing the lived experience, what you learn from the lived experience.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think what we can definitely conclude is when somebody passes away, the grief is so big, isn't it? It can be so big. And then you have so many decisions to make, but we have the stuff, and we got the paperwork, and we got the funeral or the cremation. We've got like 10,000 things suddenly to do, and having your end of life paperwork sorted can be a massive help in that situation, right?
Oh, massively. And what people who've been in my world will have heard me say time and time again is what my husband gave me by dying well is he gave me an emotional handrail. My life was turned upside down. I felt like I was living in a kind of bombed out site of chaos. But having the stuff that he literally left me a letter, and in the letter he said, it will seem absolutely massive, but as with all massive things, you just need to take it step by step. And I remember one day as clear as anything, and I put the kids to bed, and they were so tiny, they were 6 and 8 when he died. And I'd gone back downstairs, and it was middle of term time, and I was still gone back into the old world of a lawyer, and I felt exhausted, and the kitchen was chaos. Kids had just got up and left the table, school bags everywhere. And I looked at it, and it just felt overwhelming. And I was like, he said one thing at a time. And I just thought, priority for tomorrow is the school bags. I will just do the school bags, and then I will take a breather. And then I was like, right, so next thing, they're going to need breakfast, clear the table. And I literally went round the kitchen, one thing at a time, literally only focusing on one thing. And before I knew it, the kitchen was straight again. And it sounds so crazy, like how can just a messy kitchen be so overwhelming? But I think grief, you can't underestimate how much mental capacity the grief takes up, and then organizing the other stuff on top of that, and then every single item of theirs suddenly has a history and a story. And I'm sure that you've come across it, but I remember not wanting to get rid of his toothbrush. Now, his toothbrush was minging, it wasn't even relatively clean or new, but I didn't want to get rid of it because it was his toothbrush. And 6 months down the line, I was like, why on earth did I struggle with that? And I threw it in the bin. But at the time, I just, there's a thing called continuing bonds. And when someone dies, we have to have a new relationship with them. And we have to work out what our links are with them in this new world where they aren't. And suddenly, items can take on. And actually, it was a fellow APDO person who turned around to me, because I am the first person to say, I will get experts in to help me. So I employed lovely Jasmine from down here in the Southwest, and she came in, she helped me out, and she said, if you keep everything, nothing is special. And I was just like, wow, yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so true. You have to, Leslie and I say something different. We call it the quality over the quantity. If you keep everything, nothing is important. So you have to, you can't keep 500 things, because then how do you have to move, you have to kind of look at where you are now and move forward. Because if you hang on to everything, you will stay stuck in the past. And you need to make space for your current situation and where you want to go. So you have to find that quality. And that doesn't mean that a week after a person passes away, you have to get a skip and throw everything out. Absolutely not. But it does, you need to over time, revisit the things and go, okay, right, hold on a minute. What's important to me? And it deep down inside, right? You get, oh my gosh, I forgot. And that's the moment like, oh, this is important. But all the other things are not. So, yes, definitely. Well, I want to talk about mind monkeys, but let's go for a break and then we're going to talk some more. Hello, listeners. Welcome back to this wonderful conversation that I'm having with Emma Gray from Rainbow Hunting about all things wills and end of life paperwork. And it sounds a bit heavy, but I've already learned so much, and I hope you are learning so much too. Now, Emma, you have identified mind monkeys that block doing life admin, that create procrastination. So tell me more about this. I would love to know more.
So I love this. This is something that often comes up in my will challenge, is I say to people, and I try and make it fun. And like you said, I know it sounds absolutely mad, but I love talking about wills and death and end of life, partly because I love the positive difference it makes in people's worlds. But the mind monkeys, so they are the things that the old internal stories that we have, that we tell ourselves, and at some point they will have served a purpose. So I'm too young to need a will, or it's too complicated, or I don't want to think about death. And sometimes even they can be fascinating, but they're the old stories that at one point in our life might have, and they might still be keeping us safe. But the problem is that they're not serving us anymore, because they're stopping us from doing something that we desperately need to do. And it's absolutely fascinating. So often in my will challenge, there's absolute classics which come up year after year. People don't know who to have as the guardian, but if you don't know who to have as the guardian, sure as hell, if something happens to both the parents, everyone else is going to be a bit stumped too. And it's the kind of aim is to do the best you can for now with an eye for the future. And it may not be perfect, but as long as you've got capacity, you can redo it. When the oldest kid turns 18, you can make the oldest kid a guardian in the UK of the younger kids. So, it's really important to keep it under review. But with these old stories, the first thing is to try and work out where they came from and what's linked into them in the tapestry of your life, and how they worked and why they no longer work, and to be kind about them, not to be critical. I'm a really big one that there's no judgment. It should all be compassionate and it all should be kind. And other ones that people have a block with, a really fascinating one is sometimes people don't do a will because they don't know how to find a solicitor they can trust, which is bonkers, because when you think about it, all solicitors should be trustworthy. But I think you've got to, like everything, like therapists, like coaches, like declutterers, you've got to find someone who gets you. And if the first person doesn't quite work and they don't quite understand you, you can say with the greatest respect in the world, I'm sorry, but I don't think that you're giving me the answer that I want, and go and get a second opinion from someone else and try somewhere else. But it's these mind monkeys that I love working with. You must come across them though in the decluttering as well, the stories that people tell themselves that mean that they can't get rid of their stuff.
Oh, for sure. It's like, well, but I don't drive, so I can't get my stuff out of the house. And I'm like, well, we've got lots of other options. We
Yeah.
can ask a neighbor, ask a friend, ask a family member. Lots of charities collect from people's houses. You can go on a free giveaway app and put it outside of your house and people can pick it up. But it's like, don't try and go over a hurdle, go around a hurdle,
Yeah.
because you can't have all these things stopping you. You have to.
And also, the question I would be fascinated with is if someone comes up with and especially as a declutterer, if you're providing lots of options and you're still finding the mind monkeys are there, is instead of thinking about the solution to go back to the problem, but what is it about this stuff leaving the house that really bothers you?
Yeah, yeah, exactly, because there's always something going on,
Yeah.
right? There's something going on.
Mm.
That's why we talk so much about the emotions that sit behind the clutter. It's
I
not
love
about,
that.
yeah, it's not about the clutter. Everybody can grab a bin bag and put something in the bin, or in the recycling, or in donation, but it's the things that sit behind it that stop people. And that's the same with this end of life paperwork, right? They might think, maybe one of the things that you see, but my paperwork is a complete mess, so how can I sort, how can I get a will if I don't even have my paperwork sorted? Well, one doesn't mutually exclude the other. It's handy to have your paperwork more organized, but you can still make a will, because people will be able to find the utility bills and the mortgage paperwork and the bank statements and all of those things at some point. It's more
Yeah.
challenging, but it's possible. And I think it's so important that we talk about this and we
Yeah.
are open about it, and go, you don't have to be in your 70s to start thinking about a will. You can start thinking about a will much, much sooner. Just like, when you are sorting out a mortgage for your house, or maybe when you're getting married or living together, or having children. Those can be like moments when you go, actually, I'm here at the solicitors anyway. Maybe I need to hook a will or the other paperwork onto it. Or maybe that feels too much. You go, okay, hold on a minute. I've got this sorted now. My next step is to do
Yeah.
all of this, because I don't want to leave it until it's the how do you call it, like the 19th hour, or how do you say that again? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know what I mean?
Just say the last hour, but
Yeah,
yeah,
the
I know
last
what you
hour,
mean.
or
Yeah.
try to tackle it when somebody indeed has passed away, and then you already have so many decisions to make.
Yeah. And that's what I say about I don't like it all being a crisis purchase. And I
Yeah.
slightly feel the same with mental health as well, in that, for some reason, it seems to be okay to go to a coach, a counselor, a therapist if you're having a problem with your mental health. But people don't advocate for going for that support when you're well.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
actually, I think that it should be a wellness thing, that we all have support, because there is so often stuff that bubbles away. And then when people come as a crisis purchase, what I find fascinating, because most of my one-to-one work is not paperwork, it's grief. And what's fascinating is there's always a presenting grief why they've come, which is the death of a spouse or a parent or a sibling or whoever it might be.
Hmm.
And then linked in with it, so intertwined like a beautiful, intricate tapestry, is so much stuff. And I think that leads us back onto the paperwork, like you were just saying about being authentic. I think that one of the things that people quite like about me is I'm honest. And one of the things that I really struggle with is the paperwork. I have a crazy ADHD brain. But within paperwork, there can be so much shame. I don't know if you come about it, but people worry about, are they going to discover that they should have, you know, done something that would have meant that they had some money, or they didn't do something so they lost the money, and there's so much guilt and shame
Yeah.
wrapped up in it, which I think is so important to acknowledge, because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, none of us are perfect, and we've
No.
all got horror stories hidden away amongst this, that, and the other. And I know you come from a phenomenally organized family, but not everybody is that
Yeah.
organized.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think it can be so helpful to go, right, I'm gonna take this on, and I want to do it, and I want to figure it out. It's a very brave thing to do, whether you're doing it by yourself or with the help of a professional organizer, in the help within our membership. I think just go, you know what, we can't all be good at everything. We all have our stuff that we're good at. And for me, it happens to be that I've got a very organized brain, and it all makes sense in my head. But do I still have to sort out photos on my computer? And yes, of course, we can't all have everything nailed all the time. It doesn't work that way. But I think it's important that you're able to find something. It's the same with having the will. You can't do a will perfectly, but at least you've got something in place, which is a starting point. And like you say, you can tweak it and look at it, look back at it, and all of those things. Because I think it's really important that I think it can give people a lot of calmness when they've got these things sorted, right?
Yeah, and I really think that grief and death and our emotions, and even just sometimes thinking about our paperwork, it's it fills our brain with so much stuff, and actually what we need is structure and order, and that, what I call that emotional handrail that we can lean on as life is hard. And my husband died well, left loads of information, left loads of stuff, and left letters. And like, still to this day, I will read the letter that I opened the night he died. I nearly forgot about it, and then I like pottered downstairs at like 2 a.m. because I couldn't sleep, and opened up a cabinet and got it out, and burst into floods of tears, and collapsed down onto the dog bed with the 2 dogs that we had, and read it through a tear-stained face. But actually, that letter has really helped me and has kept me going. And he said in it, I thought this would be a really hard letter to write, but actually it's really easy. And you know, and it was amazing, and it's given me confidence, it's given me help and support when I needed it. And I think it goes back into that continuing bonds. When someone dies, I often say that you need 3 new relationships. You have a new relationship with the person who's died, because obviously you still love them, so you still want to have their memory and think about them, and maybe some rituals and this, that, and the other, but they're no longer physically with you. So you don't need their toothbrush, you know, you don't need the certain bits and bobs that they had, but you do want to remember them somehow. So how does that look in your life? There's a new relationship with yourself, because I believe that the death of a loved one fundamentally can change us. Doesn't change everyone, but a lot of us. So what does that look like? Who are we? What are we doing? Financially, people can be in a very different place as well. And then there's a new relationship with society, and that's one. And I find it fascinating, because when I say that to clients, they often find one aspect of that harder than others, and it's like, fab, okay, so that's where we need to do some work, and that's where we need to think about.
Yeah. And you mean with like a new place in society, is that you mean like you're no longer like a couple, but you're now like a widow, is that what you
Yeah,
mean?
it's how the external world see you, because some people um might look exactly the same. They've got the same haircut, they look the same, they might look a bit sad, but to all intents and purposes they look the same. But inside they may or they may not feel fundamentally different. But society can't tell that. So how do
Yeah.
you integrate that into life? And vice versa. Sometimes people cut their hair, they change their clothes, they have a massive clear out. There's a suddenly, and society sometimes doesn't know how to cope with that either. They're
No.
like, you know, but because we don't talk about it enough, there is no right way to do grief. There's no set stages, there's no script. I always say that grief is as unique as the relationship we had with the person who died. So it's like
Yeah.
a fingerprint. So you
Yeah.
can't write a rule book for it. So the way you do it is right for you. And yeah, and it's just working out how that, sometimes people realize, I realized when I had my little lockdown crisis, I realized I'd forgotten who I was. I'd been so sucked into caring for my husband, being a wife, being a mum. I'd forgot. Someone turned around to me and said, what does Emma enjoy doing? And I was like, I genuinely can't think of an answer. I
Yeah.
cannot tell you what I want to do for me. I can tell you what I
Yeah.
will do with the kids. I can tell you what I used to do with my husband. But as far as what makes my heart sing? What do I want to do for me? I was just stumped.
Yeah, yeah. And that's why probably rainbow hunting kind of really kind of took off. You found your
Mm.
purpose and you're sharing your knowledge so far and wide. Emma, thank you so much for this conversation. I've really, really enjoyed it. I know our listeners might want to know more. You mentioned the will challenge. What can people do? Is there maybe a quiz or a course, or where can people find out more about you? What do people do?
I love you guys so much. So the website is very, very easy. It's literally www.rainbowhunting.co.uk. I do an annual will challenge. The idea with the will challenge, I'm no longer a qualified lawyer, so I don't draft the wills, but I take people from head in the sand. You were saying about your mum being super organized when your dad died. So I give them a form that has everything that I wish clients had given me when they walked in the door to instruct me as a lawyer, because I think so often otherwise the lawyers are almost having to therapize and help people work out what they want, whereas actually if they get told this is what I want, now can you translate it into legal or tell me what trusts are irrelevant, etc., etc., etc. So they do the legal advice, but you know what you're asking them for. So that's the Will Challenge. It happens once a year, usually kind of middle of the year. So I've just run one. I have a Sadmin course, which takes people through those set stages I said of making sure their foundations are in place, the legals, the practical, the digital, the emotional, and then how to keep it up to date. That's online, it's there anytime. I've got a few exciting ideas in the pipeline, and then I do one-to-one grief coaching as well. But I also have a newsletter, so if people go on the website, and you mentioned about the quiz. So the quiz is quite cool. The quiz is to help people work out how sorted their life admin, end-of-life paperwork, whatever you want to call it is. So yeah, that's the quiz.
Perfect. So what we'll do, listeners, we'll put Emma's website in the show notes as well, rainbowhunting.co.uk. But you'll find it in the show notes because I think it could be really helpful for our listeners. And of course, I would love to know from you listeners if this conversation has been helpful for you. Have you kind of listened in and gone, oh, I don't have a will. I don't have a letter of wishes. Don't have a power of attorney. My paperwork is kind of a bit in a state. Actually, I'm a bit all over the place here. And maybe don't panic, stay calm. That's really important. But maybe this is your little nudge to go, okay, what do I need to do here? What's the one piece of live admin that I've been putting off? Because maybe you already have that form on your desk to kind of contact somebody, or maybe you've already been in contact with a solicitor and they've sent you paperwork back and you still haven't filled it in. What's the thing that you can do to kind of take that next step and to kind of get things moving along a little bit, because your future self will thank you for it so much. And maybe you realize, actually I need to have a conversation with my partner, my husband, my kids, my family, whoever it is, and kind of go, how do you guys feel about this? And let's not be, no, we can't talk about it. There will come a point that unfortunately we are all, not going to be here any longer. So hopefully you've been inspired by Emma's amazing story, her fantastic advice. So Emma, thank you so much again for being here. It's been honestly such a pleasure.
Oh, I can't thank you enough, Ingrid. I have loved it, and it feels like such a privilege and an honor. I love your podcast. I love your advice, and I definitely love what you've just said. What's the one little next step people can do to just move a step forwards and then celebrate what they've done?
Exactly. Well, thank you, listeners, for tuning in, and we can't wait to see you next week.
Thanks so much for listening to the Declutter Hub podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us in your podcast player so you don't miss an episode, and we'll see you next week.